Good, Phyllis. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to let you go first in introducing yourself and whatever comments you want to make, and then I'll introduce me and we'll go from there.
Yep. So my name is Mac Farr. I'm the executive director of the Villages CDC. And today we're going to talk a little bit about politics and policy in the neighborhoods. We're coming fresh off of a presidential election, headed into a new administration, and we have a mayoral election this coming year. So there's going to be a lot going on, both in terms of politics and policy, and there's going to be a lot for us to discuss.
Thanks, Mac. Once again, Phyllis Edwards, the Executive Director for Bridging Communities, also the board chair for CDAD. Glad to be with you today. With us, that will be joining us today, we have Barry Blackwell from Councilwoman Pro Temp office with us. Hi, Barry. Good to see you. We also will be joined, Brian Snyder will be joining us from Detroit Action. And around 5 o'clock, Councilwoman Castenada Lopez will be joining us. So to talk about policies that are impacting us at a city level. So today's conversation is about policies and politics in the neighborhood. And the reason why this is so important, I feel, is that policies are in that unique tool, right? That can produce as well as reduce inequalities in our country, in our state, in our city. And cities in themselves wield an enormous amount of power in determining the fortune and the outcomes of its residents. I always think about, I'm a seasoned person. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm aged, and so I'm glad to be at that age because I've had an opportunity to experience policies, everything from I was a child that picked cotton to where I am today, right? And so you say, Phyllis, you picked cotton. Yes, I did. But even so, I think about one of the policies that impact us is Social Security, right? People hope to have it when they get older, but Social Security was one of those policies that was created in an effort to reduce the inequalities, when in reality, for a long time, it produced inequalities because our agricultural workers and the domestic work industries could not get that. And that's where a lot of the people of color were. And so you had decades of people receiving Social Security when other folks didn't. It wasn't until I think 1948 1948 that domestic workers were incorporated into Social Security, and not to 1950 that agricultural laborers were included in that. And so as we move forward, we want to talk about different policies that are impacting us here in the city of Detroit. Prior to COVID-19 being declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, our governor said that a lack of running water did not constitute a public health emergency. Our mayor said that a moratorium on shutoffs would be inadvisable because people would stop paying their bill. So now, as a result of that, of COVID-19, I think in March, Governor Whitmer signed an executive order that suspended water shutoffs. And in that, they created the Water Restart Program with about a $2 million of source of funding that were able to get water restored. That was one of the big things. And supposedly about $5,000 per household, because we know a lot of those households didn't have the proper plumbing to even turn the water back on. So that's the conversation that we're having today. And we're going to start that conversation off with Barry from Councilwoman Pro Temp's office to talk to us about the Detroiters' Bill of Rights. Barry?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for for having us here this day. Ms. Edwards, your comments were spot on as it relates to the mayor and the governor and their initial reaction to the need to stop water shutoffs, particularly in the midst of a public health pandemic. And so that kind of leads us to where we are today. As we all know, COVID and what COVID has done and the issue of racial injustice in America and all the protests that we've seen all across the country, it certainly hasn't fallen on deaf ears. as it relates to our offices. And when I say our offices, I'm referring to the Office of Council President Pro Tem Mary Sheffield and Council Member Raquel Castenada Lopez. We listened to those concerns. We heard the cries of the people. And as a result, we decided as an office to come up with a platform for social justice organizations, for all these different think tanks and subject matter experts and coalitions to come together to say, to map out what do we want our policies to look like in the city of Detroit? What do we want our charter to say? How do we want our elected representatives to respond to our needs? How do we want city agencies to respond to our needs? And so the Detroit Bill of Rights is really a collage of ideas based on experiences that Detroiters go through every single day. And so there are, I believe, 9 pieces of legislation, or 9 pieces of, not legislation, but 9 pieces of kind of 9 points, 9 topics that the Detroit Bill of Rights speaks to. And I won't go into the nuances of all of them. Certainly, we can make sure that you have that information. But in a nutshell, what it does is it creates a system where we think Detroiters have a voice in the future in the way that our city is run. The good thing is right now, this is happening at a time when we're reshaping our charter. As many of you know, our charter is the constitution for the city of Detroit. And so we have an opportunity right now to put language in it that really makes these things permanent. And that's the good thing. Like, administrations change. There's going to be a new council at some point. Don't know when, there will be a new executive in the mayor's office. There will be a new governor in Lansing. And so when we put things in our constitution, that's what makes it permanent. That's what makes sure that the citizens have what they need. That's really in a nutshell. And so what we did was we submitted these 9 pieces of these 9 different rights, if you would, to the Charter Commission, and we're asking that they put them in the charter. And of the 9, I want to say 4 have already been vetted by the Charter Commission, and I think that those are good to go. And then the remainder are currently being vetted by the law department. I mean, not by the law department, but by the Charter Commission. And they're going through their due diligence. I can tell you the ones that have passed. It's the right to access and mobility. It's the right to live free from discrimination and disability. It's the right to environmental health, the right to recreation, and the right to water and sanitation. And I think all of those things are kind of self-explanatory. I think if you have questions, I'm certainly here to answer them. But we're basically saying that these are basic things that the people in this city have a right to. And we want to make sure that it's in the charter, so that regardless of who the mayor is, regardless of who the city council is, these are established agencies, these are established protocols that have to be followed. Thank you. Are there any questions or anything else you want me to add to that, Ms. Edwards?
Well, I just want to, if you could just tell us, I have it, the ones here, and you mentioned 4 or 5 of them, but could you just tell everybody just what all 9 of them are?
Yes, so I'm sorry. Absolutely. So it's right to water. So that is we're asking that we stop water shutoffs. Okay. There's also the establishment of a water affordability program, which is kind of crazy because the city of Detroit actually, before I even started working for council, and I've been with Pro Tem Sheffield for 6 years now, so going on 7. So even before I took office, the city actually had a water affordability plan that we had. It was written, it was ready to go, and the previous administration, the current administration didn't go for it. But the city of Philadelphia is using the same exact water affordability plan that we're using in Detroit. Just a quick side note. It also establishes an advisory board. So that's the right to water. The second one is in right to environmental health. That particular right establishes the Office of Environmental Justice and Sustainability. One of the things that we realize, and one of the things that I know, because I mean, I live in the city just like all of us live in the city, but environmental injustice is a real thing. And it's something that we deal with every single day. I was driving down Jefferson just the other day, and I won't say what plant, but there was a plant, and it smelled like I was riding past a nail salon, and there are no nail salons in the area. So it's just one of those things that we have to be laser focused on. And so that is why we want to create an Office of Environmental Justice and Sustainability. It also establishes calls for the establishment of an Environmental Justice Commission, and it also establishes a public health fund. The next one is right to recreation. This is a bit personal for me. I think now, before COVID, I was 30 pounds heavier. And since I've been able to get into, we've been able to kind of like function independently of not having to go into the office every day. I've been able to go outside and get physical recreation every day. And it's been amazing. And so that just kind of speaks to the importance of, especially in the middle of a pandemic, it speaks to the importance of having regular fitness. And it's a quality of life thing, quite frankly. There's no reason why we shouldn't have accessible green parks and spaces for people to walk, ride bikes. It's just no reason. It's just no reason for it at all. And so we want to make sure that that is an established process and something that is an inherent right in the charter. We also want to create the right to safety. And so that kind of has a couple bullet points. One, it's calls for the demilitarization of the police department. It also calls for restriction on surveillance, and it also restructures the Border Police Commission. The surveillance piece is particularly kind of pointed for our office. We've been working for the last couple of years with the ACLU on creating policies that but policies that dictate, I don't want to use the word dictate either, policies that outline protocols for how surveillance equipment is deployed throughout the city of Detroit. And so we are all familiar with green light. And recently the planning department, the Department of Public Works recently announced that they're going to be installing 200 and something cameras on street poles or camera lights throughout the city in the next couple of years. And so we want to make sure, while these things are important, we want to have a city that is certainly forward thinking in terms of how it manages its traffic, because we realize that that's something that cameras can be beneficial for, and also how we manage and deal with crime. However, and at the same time, we have to create a process by which citizens have a transparent voice for when these cameras are deployed. And so that's what we're calling for. We're calling for a process that says that when cameras are being installed in a particular neighborhood, that the citizens need be informed. And that includes a use report, it includes a public hearing, and it includes an opportunity for citizens to know basically what's going on. It's a transparency process. And then we're also calling for the demilitarization of the police department. I think that we know why. And while we understand there's a necessity for police, we also want to look at other options that beyond militarized processes. Then we're also calling for the right to live free from discrimination. And so that's going to call for protections and support of Detroit's immigration communities. So that's going to establish a couple of different things. So that's going to establish an Office of Immigrant Affairs. It also establishes an Immigrant Affairs Commission. And it also adopts a language access policy. I have to give major kudos to the Office of Council Member Raquel Castenada Lopez, not just for helping to lead this effort, the entire effort, but also for being just a vocal advocate on the rights of immigrants and making sure, hats off to her language access policy. I think it's an amazing thing and a necessary thing. My laptop is about to die. Give me one little skinny skosh.
Okay, well, we'll wait for Barry to come back.
I'm back.
Okay, go ahead, finish up. Great, that was cool.
Okay, so yes, it establishes the Office of Immigrant Affairs. I think that again, without having to go into the why, I think we understand why it's necessary. It's particularly coming out of a Trump presidency. We want to make sure that we're making safe spaces for people. And on a personal note, I was watching something on TV the other day. I don't remember what I was watching, but a young lady was telling a story about how she was oftentimes afraid She was an undocumented citizen, if I understood correctly, but she would oftentimes be afraid to go to school or just do just normal things that we take for granted, traveling to the grocery store, traveling to the doctor's office because of concern of getting pulled over and then having to be face the consequences of that. And so it's important that we have agencies in the city that understand that those are very sensitive issues that need to be addressed. And so that's one thing. The next thing, it also calls for the protection of support of the Detroit's disabled community. Same thing. We want to create an Office of Disability Affairs that establishes and also establishes a Disability Rights Commission. We want this package of rights to be reflective of all of the faces in the city of Detroit. Right to access and mobility. We want to create a low income fare. That's for DDOT. That's something that our office has been working for. We understand and realize that there are budgetary concerns and constraints with this particular piece of legislation. And this is something that we've been trying to push on council at the table, but now we're asking for it to be put in the charter. People have to have a right to you have to have a way to get to work. You have to have a way to get to the doctor. You have to have a way to get to the grocery store, and we have to create policies that speak to it. Well, not quite lastly, we also right to housing. We need to redefine or define affordability based on the city's AMI. So right now, when we look at AMI in the city of Detroit, we look at a tri-county snapshot, which is not accurate because we realize that the area median income in Detroit is a lot less than what it is when you consider the surrounding suburbs. And so we want to create policies that speak to Detroit's AMI and does not consider the AMI of our surrounding communities. Also establishes an affordable housing trust fund and creating affordable housing needs assessments. The last item is the right to fulfillment of basic needs. So this one will create an equitable budgeting principles. And so what this basically looks at is when we do our budget, how are we placing priorities? One of the things that we're grateful for this year is that the administration announced kind of like a budgetary participatory budget process, whereas they go out and they're surveying people to determine what city services they feel that they need the most. And so that's something that we're excited about. So those are all of our Bill of Rights. I hope I've explained them in some good detail. I hope no one's confused or like, what is he talking about? But that's kind of like in a nutshell what it is. We just want to really make sure that going forward, our charter is reflective of all of the needs of all of the people in the city throughout every neighborhood in the city of Detroit. And I think that this package of rights is a good start, and it's a good way to help solve some of the problems in the city of Detroit. Cool. And with that, is there anything else, Ms. Edwards?
I'm gonna let Mac start. Mac.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Phyllis, and thank you very much, Barry, for that.
Thank you.
One comment followed up with a question that I have is, it sounds like each of these articulated sort of rights has certain policy proposals attached to it. And, government isn't free. Like, all of this sort of needs to be paid for. How are you finding implementation and paying for it when the city is, going through the budget challenges that it has right now?
And I understand, and those are legit questions. And I think that one of the things to remember is that one key thing to remember and note is that this still has to be vetted. And so every single item that the Charter Commission, that even they endorse and that they approve, still must be vetted by the state. And so I don't think that the members of the charter, and I certainly don't think that the state of Michigan would allow anything to pass the vetting process that would be detrimental to our budget. With that being said, I often find that we find the money for the things that we want. That's a personal statement, right? We find the money for the things that we want. We have to invest in people. And if we can find money for all these other things and all these other programs, then certainly we can find money for an affordable housing, for a water affordability plan. Certainly we can find money for a DDOT low fare program. Like, it's about setting priorities.
Yep.
But I do hear you. We do have some serious budget concerns that need to be addressed as well. Yes, sir.
All right, and with that, we will turn it over to Brandon Snyder from Detroit Action. Brandon?
Hey folks, what up though? So my name is Brandon Snyder. I'm the executive director at Detroit Action. We're a grassroots, member-led, community-based organization building power for working class Black and brown folks here in the city of Detroit. Our work is in relaunch or marriage, if you will, of the Detroit Action Commonwealth, which is the union of homeless and formerly incarcerated folks on the Northeast Side, working out at the Capuchin Soup Kitchen and St. Leo's Soup Kitchens, a number of city warming centers, and Good Jobs Now, which was a SCIU Fight for Fair Economy campaign that ran for a number of years. My work is about building the power and also making sure that we have the political resources and the power internally to be able to run the campaigns that we care about, whether it's around jobs, housing, criminal justice, public education, or reform or democracy. So, I want to thank Barry for being able to talk about the Detroit Bill of Rights and what it means to Detroiters. My team, Jennifer, who's our organizing director, as well as a number of our members, helped contribute to the Bill of Rights. And additionally, in addition to this Bill of Rights that was put forth by our organization and a number of allies, many of whom are on this call right now, or in this session, or in other sessions, we produced three other recommendations for the Charter Commission. One being an expanded participatory budgeting session, budgeting process, and two, and then the other being basically, how do we talk about removing corporate money from politics? How do we create a process around democracy dollars, which is a process and a conversation that a number of big cities from east to west here in the United States have thought about, of how do we make sure that Detroiters have a say in politics and it's not just being overbearing, overbrought by corporate billionaires and corporate actors. So we were able to engage in those processes, and we also were able to participate in, as we talked about, safety and health and policing and the other policies that were put forth. So let me just talk a little bit about our process and I guess why I was chosen to be a part of this politics and policy for the neighborhoods. Like, when I think about Detroit Action, I think about our work. We see ourselves as a little union for the hood, an organization that's fighting for folks with jobs and without jobs, an organization that's fighting for folks to make sure that they have not only the leadership skills and the development capable of not just me as the executive director advocating for them, but themselves being at the table and it's in effect flipping over the table and creating headphones, died, and then came back to life. So when we think about our work, it's about building the political power for working class folks, for them to be able to determine the politics that they want to see in our community. And for us, what that looks like when we think about processes, our organizers are out every single day, knocking on doors, on phone calls, having conversations in order to bring folks into the process, but also to educate and train them and develop them on what it looks like to build power with and by for themselves. We do this through a process in which we believe, we refer to as deep canvassing. So wherefore our people are not only sharing stories and not only eliciting responses, but sharing stories of their personal experiences, connecting those lived in personal narratives to shared values, and then moving people from shared values to electoral or policy action. So being able to not just have a conversation on the doors that we see typically of elected officials where it's a knock and it's a 2-minute conversation of will you vote for such and such, but actually moving people to respond based on shared values and shared experiences. So when we talk about criminal justice reform, when we talk about defund the police, it's not just from a pie in the sky narrative. It's making sure that the people who have the lived experiences of violence and of incarceration are able to be in the driver's seat around what policy looks like around safety and how we reimagine it. So, I want to start right there. I think when we think about our policy and politics for the upcoming year, upcoming 2020, it's important that as we want to reimagine our city, coming out of COVID, coming out of the budgetary crisis that we're seeing both in the city and the state, what we're doing is leading by having the people who are experiencing the economic crunch by experiencing COVID, in their lives and their families' lives, having people experience unemployment, lead and drive policy. So I'll start right there.
Thanks, Brandon. One of the questions that came up, Max talked about the financing of these initiatives as it relates to the Bill of Rights. And we're honored today to have with us Peter Hammer from Wayne State University. And in the chat, Peter said that we have to transcend our deficit thinking mentality. Peter, are you still on the line with us?
Absolutely. Good to see you, Phyllis.
Good to see you too. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah,
please?
it's just that, and I think actually,
and just tell people who you are, Peter, because
I teach at Wayne State Law School and I direct the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. But I think Barry said it the best, that we pay for the values we have. We're at a point where we're trying to define what community is and what our values are. And our community and our values then shape our budget. And we see the tactics that are used against that kind of thinking. So if we remember the sort of COVID comes in, has just devastating effects upon the African-American community. And then the next headline you read 2 weeks later is that COVID is causing expenses and that we're going to have to cut back on our spending at the state and the city level, which means that we're going to be undermining the social and economic determinants of health, which feed into that whole cycle of death and destruction. I really think we're at a point where we have to ask fundamental questions about what our values are. And I just am incredibly excited to work in a city that is having a Detroiters Bill of Rights. And we have to honor that process. And that process then has to dictate how we allocate our resources. And if resources are scarce, well, then we allocate scarce resources in relationship to the values. We don't allow the sort of fear of deficits to let us not even imagine the future that we want to have.
Thank you, Peter. And so as we continue, I want to open it up. If you want to have questions and don't want to speak, please, I encourage you to put them in the chat. As we continue to do this work, when we design or implement policies that exacerbate inequality, then we need to hold the policymakers, we as advocates for change, or certainly get the residents and community engaged in community in the political arena so that we can modify and improve these things. One thing I heard today, that there was a bill already, a water bill that could help many residents, that was laying on the desk or laying to the side of folks who had the ability to implement them. And so then the question for the group today is, you can't make the change if you're not knowledgeable, right? So how can we become more knowledgeable about the things that are going on in the city? Because oftentimes we're working doing our day-to-day and can't really monitor the city council or state reps. So how do we keep abreast? And I'm going to call on Ruth because she's been active in that area for a while. Ruth, tell us how you kept abreast and some pointers that you can share with us today of what we need to look for to ensure that we stay up to date on our policies. And I'm just going to give you 5 minutes because I see Councilwoman Lopez has joined us and I want to get her in.
So I am Ruth Johnson. I'm the Public Policy Director for CDAD, Community Development Advocates of Detroit, meaning I am paid to do my best to follow, analyze, and share information and help other people engage in the public policy process. But I would say get in where you fit in, meaning you can get information by signing up for City Council and City of Detroit alerts and things like that. I'd be happy to share how to do that. There are trainings that CDAD offers, Michigan League of Public Policy, Michigan Nonprofit Association, lots of groups on understanding the legislative process or the budget process. But the most important thing is what we already do. It's relational. It's building relationships with other people who are doing the same work. So you are not an island, you're not a silo, you're not a lone wolf, you are not by yourself. There are others who care about the things that you care about, who value the things you value, that you can work with to build the power, not just to have your voice heard, but have change happen, or at least increase the likelihood of having change happen. So again, there's access to information. Yes, it's imperfect. And I think there are forces and people who are actively discouraging you or putting up barriers for you to know what's going on. But despite that, I would say at least start with where information is available and to join or create those movements and groups that have power, use power, and experience the change that we want to see.
Thanks, Ruth. I'm, where did Councilwoman Lopez go? I just saw her.
I'm here. I came back. Sorry, I've had back-to-back meetings, so I was sneaking a snack. I'm sorry.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, Councilwoman, for joining us. Barry from Councilwoman Pro Tem's office explained the Bill of Rights quite well, but I do have two questions for you, if you don't mind. One is around the Bill of Rights. If the charter includes the Bill of Rights, what is the recourse for Detroiters if their rights are violated? That's the first question.
Okay. So sorry, quick question. So you said you all already received the presentation on what it is.
Yeah, Barry from Councilwoman Pro Tem's office told us what it was, unless you want to tell something else different.
No, I had the PowerPoint, and I'm not sure, Barry, if you use that, but yeah, I just had the PowerPoint. We can send it to you all if you want to reference that.
Okay.
It just says high level, and then separately we have the close to 20-page document. I think I can share the link in here, I think.
Okay, will you share the link so that we can send that out?
Yeah, so then you can see that, because there's like the overview, the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
High level, and then there's the which is very bullet pointed, and then there's the actual document with the legalese and policy recommendations. That was what was officially submitted. So but Barry might have had that already.
No, he didn't. We didn't have a PowerPoint.
Okay, got it. Yes. Okay, so forgive me, the question. So we were on a charter commission meeting till like midnight, so forgive me, I'm super tired. But so the question is, if the charter, if it does include, what's the recourse for Detroiters if their rights are violated? I mean, I know one of the things that the charter, so two quick things. One, our Bill of Rights, right? We didn't go through the entire charter to amend and suggest amendments to every single section. It was based on community list of demand, so to speak. And so I know, and having had sat in, that's not right, but sat in different charter meetings, that they are looking to strengthen the enforcement language and the penalties and provisions of it to ensure that there's greater accountability. And so if people are violating the charter, that it's clearer for the public on, what the consequences should be. And it's spelled out better for that enforcing entity. So I know that's one change this charter commission is looking at. But yeah, I would say it's the same thing, right? It's the city's constitution. And so if it, for example, last night we were fighting for immigrant rights. And so well, that hasn't passed officially yet, but let's use the environmental justice work that was part of the Bill of Rights that did get adopted and included in. So part of that language speaks to passing legislation within a certain number of days to implement some of the recommendations. And so residents can look to that and be like, hey, it's been 90 days or 180 days, whatever it is, and council hasn't actually done this, or this program hasn't actually been rolled out, et cetera, et cetera. So we try to put language that was both broad enough from a policy standpoint that doesn't tie people's hands, but gets the value and the principle embedded in there and the right we're fighting for. and at the same time, it still have specific language that makes it more clear on how to enforce it. So for example, the right to water, under that piece, it talks about the timeline to create a water affordability plan. And so that's something that we try to be super clear about so that you know within this time frame, if a water affordability plan isn't created and rolled out, then we're in violation, right? Similar to what we just were talking about last night, language access standards. An interpretation, it says council shall pass and implement this within X number of days after the passage of this charter. So we try to put in at least our proposals this concrete language that helps build in enforceability and transparency and accountability.
Okay, thank you for that. That second question, part of the question from Ben Ratner was, how can organizations, individuals work to make the Detroiters Bill of Rights a reality?
Yeah, good question. And I see Stephen Boyles and some other folks who have come out to some of the charter meetings. So there's kind of been different phases. So right now, the first phase was working with, and I don't know, Barry, if you already, did you talk about the piece of just how the coalition was formed? Because that kind of informs like where we are now.
I think briefly, I didn't go into like,
okay.
Yeah, high level.
Okay, cool. No, cool. I just didn't want to like repeat anything, but so really quickly, right, like it was formed kind of in response to a lot of the demands that we were hearing and receiving after George Floyd's murder, to kind of how do we really push forward in a systemic way, like policy to address these issues. And so like structurally, and so that was kind of like phase one, was this really intense idea policy making piece, and we decided a lot of things we wanted to embed in the charter. Right now, the phase that we're in that we would love help on is kind of advocacy. Sorry, I have a cat who likes to do this at the end of the day. But is the advocacy piece in terms of submitting letters of support, showing up for public comment, because it's intense. Like I said, we were on the meeting last night, so they start at, I'm so happy I don't have one today, but they start at 5. And you know, we didn't get to do public comment last night till 11:30 at night. And so, and last night there was a lot of debate and contention around this protection of immigrant rights. But we had great, you know, advocates, experts on the call, and we were able to, you know, get that enough support to work and amend the language so it will be adopted, but it has to go back to for that piece. And so having folks continue to come and speak out during public comment or submit letters of support, because we don't want it to be construed as it's just my office, right? Because I've been the one in all the meetings, like answering questions and pushing this forward, but also for things that can be somewhat divisive or people kind of organize in silos around. It's helpful to keep emphasizing, you know, this is a coalition. We've had over 130 organizations sign on to support this, close to 600 individuals sign on. And so I think it's kind of that public, you know, organizing and pressure building of sending in comments. So for example, this Saturday in the committee meeting, they're going to be going over what we're calling the right to basic needs, which speaks to adopting, which is really key and would be amazing if we can do this. It speaks to adopting equitable budgeting principles that basically say like, hey, all of these other rights are right to water, right to safety, right to, you know, transit, right to recreation, blah, blah, blah. Like most, we've gotten 6 for 8 so far that have passed and, you know, been approved to be adopted into the draft. All of those things need resources, right? And so the equitable budgeting principles is the concept of like, we will always, and to embed into the charter, a minimum percentage to support these things, right? So the numbers may not make sense right now, but like 8% minimum always has to go to transit, you know, 10% always has to go towards health to do A, B, C, D, E. And so the concept of kind of is almost like this earmarking concept where, and cities have done this around the country, usually through taxes, but they, you know, LA did it and got it embedded in their LA County charter. And so it's putting the money and creating a budget and principles that reflect our values and our priorities in the form of supporting all these other rights that we ask for. So the right to basic needs is really the funding component to make sure all those other things are implementable. So that's what's going to be up for Saturday, as well as housing stuff. So I know that may seem simple, but you know, public comments and advocacy is really helpful. And if you can't come, just to send an email or shoot a letter to folks. So that's this current phase, and it should wrap up next Wednesday, the 9th. After that, the next piece will really be, and we would love more support, is the outreach and engagement, because this will, whatever the draft looks like, it will go on the ballot next August, and voters have to vote on it. One of the reasons we built the Bill of Rights Coalition, and really in a way is like my dream, because all of these groups have been fighting for these things for decades, right? And so building them together, we have more power, right? Working as this coalition. And so folks will, you know, there might be some people who don't like the right to water, but or they're only about the right to recreation. But it'll be really hard, I think, for people who are opponents of this to kind of knock it as a whole, because there's things in there that no one can contest against, right? And so what I would like to think people can't contest. I'm sure they would still contest, but it's like, if you're voting no, you're voting against the right to water. If you're voting no, you're voting against public transit. If you're voting no, you're voting against clean air and clean water. And so just from that standpoint, I'm sorry, I did not turn on my light and I'm really dark, I see right now. And we think in having this coordinated approach that it'll be super, super helpful. So we really hope to run, excuse me, an aggressive grassroots campaign similar to what, you know, groups did to turn out the vote in Detroit this year, to get it passed and approved by voters in August. So next year, we, yes, definitely will need boots on the ground, people to help do free advertising and education and workshops and things like that around the Detroiters Bill of Rights. So that's kind of really probably going to kick off February, March, once we get the final version that's been vetted by the state and all the attorneys.
Thank you. And so we have a statement in the chat that says human development and social capital yields some of the largest returns. One of the things that people want to do is get involved. And so from Ms. Caldwell, she states that she's been trying to get an answer and can't get an answer to how boards and commissions here in the city of Detroit allow for regular community stakeholders, residents to be able to participate. It doesn't cost anything and it should be a transparent process, but it doesn't seem to be. Can you speak to that, Councilwoman? How people can get involved with the commissions and some of the boards that should have, you know, community residents involved? It seems like sometimes they're already selected. There's no clear, transparent process.
That's not, I will say to clarify, that's not per se like the focus of the Bill of Rights. Oh, so two pieces, but as part of the Bill of Rights, there's multiple new departments where we have proposed to be created that have commissions with them. So for example, we proposed and it was adopted already to create the Offices of Environmental Justice and Sustainability, as well as an Environmental Justice Commission. And so there's like roles and responsibilities spelled out there. So that'll be like a new commission that's created. And that's for disability rights, for immigrant rights, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a couple different ones, but all of the boards and commissions are listed in the city charter. I know that doesn't seem easy to find. I believe there's also, because it depends on them, right? Some are all council appointees, more or less, most of them are kind of council and mayoral appointees. Some are all mayoral appointees. And so it is a public appointing process. So for example, I'm on the Internal Operations Committee and that's where all candidates are interviewed. And so I think the mayor's office to some extent has like a link on the website where you can go and you can see what the boards and commissions are, and you could apply on their end if you're interested in being a mayoral appointee. On the council's end, I totally agree that it's not consistent across the board, right? Like our office has an email that we send out periodically to be like, hey, these are the openings for District 6 or the openings if you're interested, like send your resume our way, right? But I don't know offhand, and forgive me if there's any one website, like I honestly haven't looked for this on the website, that has a list of all of the boards and commissions and like the names of folks and their terms and things. I know for certain ones, they have that, like the BOPC has it and they have their own website. I think the Board of Zoning Appeal has it, City Planning Commission may have it, but I don't know if there's one site that has them all. So I agree to whoever asked that question. There's a little bit, kind of digging you have to do, but you should be able to, reach out to the council person or reach out to the mayor's office to try to get more information on a specific commission or board that you're interested in. And then the other piece I'll say is like some of them aren't, city entities, like the land bank. We get questions about that all the time. Council has one appointee to that, and that's it. And so the rest are mayoral or outside of our power. And the similar for the water board, for like DWSD, things like that. The building authority, I think, is another one. And so some definitely fall and come, all this council, at least our committee, requires that every single candidate has to come and be interviewed before internal operations. But that wasn't necessarily the case like several years ago. In my first term, they didn't interview everybody. And then, yeah, and the Legislative Policy Division, which is the council's legal team, so to speak, they also have a report that they put out. But I just want to clarify, forgive me, I was not prepared to answer that question. So I'm sure there's more info out there that that's available that I just, forgive me, I don't have at this moment.
May I say something?
Yeah, good guess.
Yeah, I just want to be clear real quick. I've been on boards and commissions in other cities, and all I'm saying is in the city of Detroit, it's not transparent at all. When I first moved back here, I was looking, and there's not one place, you can see the list, but there's not a clear place. So all I'm saying is, and then I thought maybe because it was Detroit, but Chicago has a place on a website where you can look, you can apply for what you're interested in and what it takes. And I find in the city of Detroit, you have to, like Ruth said, you have to practically work and just get in where you fit in. And then we wonder why normal people who have jobs don't, participate. It's too difficult. If you want a voice from the neighborhood, make it easy for people to have a voice. That's all I'm saying. And that's what I was asking. And it's not easy. Thanks,
Oleta.
Yeah, okay. I think Ruth posted links to the websites. And again, forgive me, didn't do this research prior hand. I'm sorry, I didn't know there was going to be other questions. I could have researched a little bit more. I know that in general I get asked anything, but yeah, it's just been back-to-back day and I didn't know. So I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Mag, did you have comment?
Not really. I mean, it's funny because I've also sort of looked at the list of all the different city commissions out there, and it's like, oh, we have a Detroit Library Commission, and it is appointed mostly by the Board of Education. And, there's a lot of these operating structures, some of which, normal people can just get involved with. Like if you're just a person and you want to run for the Board of Police Commissioners, you can do that. But if you want to get involved with how to set water policy, then you need to be nominated by the mayor's office or by council. And so, I hear that. There's a lot of different layers of government that we have in Detroit, and they're not always set up to be as accessible as they could be.
Orletta, this is also one of the things that as like Detroit Action, that we are committed to solving, because I think when you think about I forget how many boards and commissions there are in the city of Detroit, but they all fall through this same exact process of, you pretty much got to know somebody to get on there. And for what that means is that there are a ton of people's voices who are left out of the process. What we've been doing for the last chunk of years or so, and, is our Power in the Precinct project, which is a board and commission training project. We've ID'd some of the open positions and open seats, and really are trying to make sure that we can move people to be nominated when the time is coming, and also give people a community home and a political home to where they can be developed as they're in these boards and commissions and advocating for the values and the policies that we care about. I think that the broader question, and that's just a smaller fix to the question that you're asking about, but the broader fix is that there's such a lack of transparency when we talk about the everyday citizen and how they engage in the political process overall.
Right, and that's my concern. If it's so difficult, people are gonna just give up. I know I'm tired, and I'm actually try to be involved.
Okay. Well, as you can see in the chat room, thank you, Councilwoman Lopez and Ruth, for putting the information in regarding some of the documents that Councilwoman spoke about, and then Ruth providing some information on how to apply to the various boards, and also a list of the various commissions in case you don't have it. Because in order for us to really make the changes that we want to see happen, we have to be knowledgeable and know, right? And it shouldn't be difficult for citizens to get this information. Without new interventions and without, the moratorium on a lot of the things that have been put in place as a result of COVID will be expiring soon, or, it definitely we need some more intervention, because otherwise we're going to have many families vulnerable for months to come as they struggle with rent, water, food, and all of that. So I know this was not on the agenda, Councilwoman, but is there something in particular that council is looking at to mitigate this issue or to help decrease some of the impact that it might have as these moratoriums are being lifted?
Sorry, can you just clarify what do you mean as it relates to the boards with the moratoriums?
No, we're past the board. We're just talking about in general, COVID-19 and the policies that have been in place, the moratorium on water shutoffs and rents and all of that. As we move towards, they're hoping that this vaccine is a cure-all, right? And that, maybe some of these moratorium, people are afraid that, and not even opening their doors for their landlord because they think they're going to get evicted right away. So I know there's been some things put in place as a result of that to help mitigate some of this, but are we thinking long range, some issues that the council might be working on that could help ease the people's minds around some of these policies?
I mean, for me, it's the Bill of Rights. I mean, we're amending the, okay. That's my office. I can't speak for other offices. So Barry, definitely chime in here. I mean, I think in my mind, that really would lead to systemic change because if we're able to get this passed and implemented, of course, not till next August, but it would put a ban on water shutoffs for certain households. And so it would create a water affordability plan. So for me, like that's really part of the systemic piece in which one of the reasons we're targeting the charter. So maybe that seems like a longer term strategy, but a year out in terms of how long policy takes to get implemented is not really that long actually. I think separately is just from a budgetary standpoint, right? Like, so we know we're facing additional deficits because, the casinos haven't reopened, businesses still aren't up and running, et cetera, et cetera. And so we know that there's going to be projected cuts even as we move forward to the budget cycle next March and April. And so for me, even before this, right, because we were in bankruptcy and had an even weaker, smaller budget, so to speak. It's like, how do you make sure our budget reflects our values and our priorities? And so something that we have asked for several years, and I was the only council member to vote no against the budget last year, was, we're investing so much in police. And even this year, when we cut budget and furloughed folks, we still put an additional $3 million into the police department. And so how are we really making sure our budget reflects our priorities and we're shifting funds to invest in these type of programs that supports people's basic needs and social services? So that's, again, I can only speak to my office, and I don't know if Barry's still on or not, if you want to chime in terms of pro tem and this team and what you all are thinking about in that regard. The last thing I'll say really quickly before turning over to Barry is just that, we are fortunate that we've gotten a chunk of federal money from COVID. And so there's some programs that we've been able to implement. It's just the sustainability of that once the grant funding goes away. And so I don't have a specific, like, this is the program that's rolling out and is going to continue to exist. But I think that conversation is evolving, and there's things we would love to see in place. The free rides for folks, the food distribution centers, additional support for legal services, and such as people who are facing eviction, et cetera, et cetera. So those are my thoughts. And Barry, if you want to chime in.
I don't have really much more to add. I think you were pretty much spot on, council member. The only thing that I would say and kind of spell out is that we're still waiting. We're kind of in a wait and see situation as it relates to what the federal government will do in terms of some type of stimulus package, because that will greatly determine what type of federal support they're going to send to local governments. That will determine what new programs we have. That will determine if we're able to pump more money to Wayne Metro, et cetera, et cetera. But we certainly are keeping our eyes out. We are looking at innovative ways, and we may be announcing some things soon. We are looking at some ways outside of policy that we can maybe excite people to support a small business in the district once a month, or things that we can do just to kind of help get people to spend money and support businesses, whether it's in person or online. So, but that's kind of where we are. We're in the wait and see phase until we figure out what type of federal dollars will be sent our way.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments while we have a few more minutes left, I think. I don't see her. I think we have a few more minutes left. Any other questions or comments?
This is just a brief comment. Thank you, Councilman, for answering my question. I'm very interested in personally getting involved and possibly rallying my organization to get involved with this. And I'm wondering sort of what the next step should be for me with these outreach and engagement efforts in the neighborhoods that you mentioned, and how I can, spread the word to folks I know, because I'm really excited about this campaign. I think it makes a lot of sense to try and embed it in the charter.
I'm muted, I apologize. Yeah, I'm not the best, follow the chat and listen, so forgive me. I know someone messaged me and I don't see it here, but I just popped my contact information in the chat box, so you definitely follow up. Yeah, I think like it has been exhausting work, to be super honest. And so part of the coalition folks, and I know again, Professor Hammer's been on calls, Brandon's been involved in such, and so part is that, there's burnout's real and we just kind of need a break. And so the draft will be finalized next, well, the voting process to draft it will be done in the next week or so, but then the initial draft won't be ready until January. So we're kind of more, doing training to build our communication campaign, et cetera, in more January, February. So it might be a little bit slower, but I think, and we're still deciding what our meeting schedule will look like, but we welcome people to come to. Right now we're meeting every other week. That might change or decrease, but we, I think having people in that space, because we're really, one, it's resources, right? And that's time or money. And so trying to figure, and networks, and so trying to figure out where are the resources we have, where do we need to fundraise, who can tap, who has relationships, like close relationship building, et cetera. So those conversations will really start, I believe, in February. So I would say anyone on the call who's interested in getting involved, and if you're not already a partner, because again, I see several partners on here who have already heard this spiel, so thank you for listening again. Just send us your contact info. It'd be great to get a sense of in what ways, what resources you can bring to, what networks or relationships you already have. So then we can definitely plug you in. But the hope is really, I think, in February to develop like a master communications, community engagement kind of outreach strategy that then we would all work towards implementing to get out the vote and inform voters for next August.
Thanks so much. I'll follow up.
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else? Jill, do you know how much time we have left? I don't want to get into a
well, we started at 4:30. It is 5:30 now. They were supposed to bring us back in the 2-minute mark, but I haven't seen that. So
okay. All right. Well, we'll keep talking until they do.
Okay.
Councilwoman, I certainly don't envy you. Pardon me?
I said I can ask you questions if you want me.
Yeah, you could. Look, we have a whole group of folks here. Mr. Yates, give us your thoughts on the conversation around policies and community.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the conversation is so rich and so Detroit oriented. I think I'm a wise person to listen and absorb and not try to be out of my lane. It's very interesting though, and that's yesterday and today, just listening in general and the civic engagement that's generated through this summit that you guys have put together. And I see some people I know, like Ms. Ruth and some others. So I've been listening and trying to gather as much background and hear, and the interaction has been fantastic. So I won't get out of my lane, Phyllis, and try to act like I know more than I know.
Well, you know what? The things I always tell people, I'm a very fond advocate of Maya Angelou and her saying that we're more alike than not alike, right? So people like to, one of the things that happens is then in the vision, they want you to think that you're the only person who's doing something, or you're the only city that's going through this. And if you've ever had a great thought one morning and said that you were going to get up early and be somewhere before the crowd gets there, and you get there and there's a line wrapped around already, you know that there are many people with those same thoughts, right? And many cities going through some of the same things. So whether you're in the great city of, where are you, Garland, in Maryland, or?
Yeah, I'm in the DMV. But
yeah, so whether you're in Maryland, the city of Detroit, Cincinnati, Memphis, wherever you are, all the cities, and I would, as Councilwoman, are still struggling with some of the same challenges, especially in our Black and brown neighborhoods. And so I don't think that we're any different. And Councilwoman, I certainly don't envy you in your seat that you sit in today, trying to prioritize, housing and water and the police department. Although I had someone in chat say that, you know, we have $330 million that's been allocated to them. Certainly when we talk about defund, is to restructure how we're funding them and allocate some of that funding to our communities where, a recreation center would make the difference, or a walk, a park where people can get out and enjoy themselves, or, we have, improving our schools and improving housing certainly would make a difference in the communities and people's lives. So I don't envy you where you sit on having to make those decisions. I applaud you actually, because I know you're one of the true champions for the people of the city of Detroit. And so I don't say that, with just saying it. I know for a fact how hard you work. So
I know, Phyllis, you're a straight shooter, so you would tell me.
Hey, if you're not doing it, I'm gonna call you out.
I know, I appreciate it. I have one resident who grades me, and so she gave me a C-, and so we joke all the time. I'm like, oh, did I make it to like a B-? Yeah, and so we just laugh. But yeah, no, I guess I would say, and to Mr. Yates, just in general, right? Like, in thinking and reflectively on this last election cycle, and thinking of like Detroit Action and other groups, it really was, our communities, Black and Brown communities, marginalized communities, who I don't know if this is a partisan group or not, but who changed the outcome of the election. I'll just say that. And so, and who really turned out. And so I really hope that moving forward at all levels of government, there's greater investment in groups that I imagine are represented in this space, because it's about not just winning a campaign, it's about transformative policies and politics in authentic engagement with communities that happens every single day and not just every 4 years. And so I think you all do that type of work. And so my hope is that that we realize, as a city, as a state, as the federal government, that we need to be investing more in groups like yours and partnering more through co-governance models versus just leading from a place of, that perpetuates the status quo, so to speak. So, and the other piece, I guess, to Mr. Yates, for me, is super helpful. And I'm very grateful to be a part of several networks of elected officials, Local Progress being one, and New American Leaders being the other one, where I'm able to call, friends in Baltimore, I'm able to call people in Tucson or whatever it is, to bounce ideas off and to gather research around what's happening on the ground. How does this policy play out in reality for these communities, et cetera, to then inform what we do here at the city. And really, if you think of some of the more conservative groups, they organize in this way nationally, right? And they go city to city to push forward different policies. And maybe our communities don't necessarily do that, but I'm hopeful that that type of collaboration can start existing more amongst our cities to, try to create really national movements around these things, around the right to water for everyone, right to housing for everyone, et cetera, et cetera. So I just shout out to all you and the work that you do.
I see that we have Stephen with us, Stephen Boyle. He's a candidate running for City Council District 3. And so the question would be to Mr. Boyle this evening, hearing all that you have and the challenges that is before the city, why would you get involved? I mean, what's the reasoning behind that?
I see that we've got a lot of people looking for their place in the city, as far as they want to. I think some of our mental conditions that we've got is a fact that there's not an awful lot of ownership opportunities. We've moved from 80% home ownership down to 20% home ownership. The number of jobs that actually are resident owned inside the city is diminishing all the time. We're finding job placement companies are setting up offices in Detroit rather than actually being located in Detroit. What I really want to start promoting an awful lot of is the cooperative ownership, where everybody becomes basically a co-ownership in the efforts that you're putting forward on a day-to-day basis. Maybe everybody has different roles that all work together. They understand the functions that are being done within whatever the organization is that they're having. I'm a proponent of the Green New Deal. I really would like to see Detroit become a catalyst in the country for how to take empty spaces and turn them into power grid centers and move us off of the heavy dependence that we have with DTE and start putting us into that new economy, new power-centered, and put it with the people and not push it out there, where a community literally is co-ownership within each other in establishing the infrastructure that we truly need. This has also got to deal with the internet as well, because the district that I'm interested in right now with District 3, there's a large portion of it that's maybe 40 to 50% not residential connected internet. So high-speed access in these areas, you'd have to go out to find it rather than finding it at your home, which becomes a very big inconvenience in the middle of winter. And just it's just something that internet becomes like a when I get to it type of thing, as opposed to the way that so much of our policies and structure of government sits. They assume that we have apps for being able to access what we need, that we're going to go to a website, we're going to get the documents that we need. How many people actually have a printer at home to actually print the documents up and carry around a piece of paper? Or are we, moving more to a digital age where we have signable PDFs that get transferred from person to person? And how many people actually even know how to do that? So these are some of the things. My background is in technology, so I'm not afraid of taking a look at how to harness technology different and make it friendly for people to be able to get themselves forward in the world. And right now, with the digital divide that we have a lot of people living back in the 1990s.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I know the digital divide is a great concern, as I hear parents calling me to talk about how they don't have the internet access for their children and for them to work from home. My seniors are calling because now, they want to have virtual doctor visits, but they don't know how to do that. And so that's a huge, if one of the things that have come out of this pandemic is the huge digital divide in communities, especially communities of color. And so with that, we continue to be involved. We continue to educate ourselves around the policies that influence our lives. I think one of the things that has happened along this pandemic journey is that people have become more involved. I don't know if because they've had more time or because of the injustices or because of whatever the reason. I think more people are involved and in tune to holding people accountable for the policies and their actions. And so one of the questions is, Councilwoman, is the internet access a part of the Bill of Rights?
It wasn't a direct one.
No.
And so it's interesting to, as the conversation evolved, we developed it based on working with racial justice coalitions. And in those initial lists of 30 plus demands, that was then how it evolved into rights, and we brought in other coalitions into the space. And so yes, we often got the question of well, what about the right to digital access? What about the right to economic freedom, or all these other things? And we're like, whoa, we agree, but it was because some capacity, and this day before we had to submit this thing. And so so it's not included in our proposals per se, but I do know that in having sat through the charter minutes, that it was submitted by other advocates in the city. I don't remember the final decision, but I do believe it was supported. I just don't remember the actual content of it. I think it was to set up some type of, it was either a commission to work towards this or embed this more intentionally, through an office. Forgive me, I don't remember that specific language, but there was definitely a debate on it and components of it that were adopted, and somebody else submitted that language. It may have been the digital justice advocates, because there's quite a few groups in the city of Detroit kind of leading the way.
Yeah, and I thought there was some initiatives around the city through Comcast and I don't know, Quicken Loan. Maybe you could speak to that to help bridge this digital divide that we currently find ourselves in. Are they isn't there some kind of initiatives around that throughout the city?
Yeah, there's different programs. The city, the Department of IT has what is their title? Let me just call it a digital. They're like the digital justice coordinator, the digital divide, digital equity manager, something like that. And so his name is Joshua. I know Barry, if you remember, I can't remember his last name, but he actually came relatively recently to council table and they did a presentation. And so, yes, there is someone who is, yes, thank you, Ruth. Ruth, you can just answer all the questions. She's always in council sessions. I mean, there's just so much, and forgive me, I feel at this moment I am on the charter commission and not at council because that's like really what we are in the trenches in. So thank you, Ruth. But yeah, so there's an initiative within the city, and Comcast and the other providers as well have stepped up to be a part of that Connect 313. And they meet monthly, I believe, with the community groups that have been leading this effort for some time. And so some of it is, you know, creating more mesh networks that are accessible and available to folks. Some of it is beyond, I guess, that Wi-Fi type of connection, but even just in terms of like the technology, whether it's phone or computer, et cetera. So there's that. And I believe there's a specific website set up that you can check out to learn more about Connect 313 and the nitty gritty of the plan. But they do hold meetings where they engage advocates and people who are part of the coalition. So if you're interested in being a part of that, I think they're relatively open to new groups joining that space.
Okay, because one of the things we're hearing today is people want to be involved, and so they want to know how they can get involved. I think the digital divide is a huge issue, such as, I mean, it's in conjunction with water, housing. If you don't know, if you can't have access, then you can't really improve your quality of life for a lack of that. So as we continue to just move through and understand policy and how it's impacting our communities, I'm really cautious, having to have, repair a couple of homes who had, the water was turned on and the plumbing wasn't there, but I understand that there was funding that should have been allocated towards that house to ensure that the plumbing was okay, but that didn't happen. So how do we hold people accountable for these things when you're just an everyday person, right? Everyday person who just don't know how to maneuver it. And especially as I work in Southwest Detroit, I know language is an issue. So, my Middle Eastern community and Councilwoman, Latino Hispanic community, accessing and having this information. How do we ensure that our communities have the correct information? And that's just an open question to anyone who's been involved in this work. Don't be shy. Come on.
I can say that in some of the efforts that I've done regarding environmental justice around Southwest Detroit, this was a few years back. It was an awful lot of going into the neighborhood, seeing the people impacted, talking with them about the issue, and then actually walking with them to the city council sessions, talking with them about how we're going to present, that they're going to have their talking points, which I understand is an awful lot of how they're feeling and how it's impacting them and so forth. And then we also have to have that backing conversation of the policy changes that are required. So it's you have to deliver not just at the personal level, you also have to deliver some substantial opportunity for change and how that change would happen to make the needs that are being expressed delivered. So I think there's a matter of how do you bring up advocacy groups so that the public feels that they can bring their voices in and have an advocacy group that actually understands how to work with their voice to make it result in some change for them.
Thank you, Stephen. That was a great segue to where I'm going. CDAD, Ruth, as the policy chair for CDAD, I know you guys are preparing your priorities for next year. So it's an opportunity for people to get involved in that. And if so, how? And how do you set your priorities? How does CDAD set priorities, policy priorities for each year?
So again, Ruth Johnson, and as you probably know, CDAD is a member organization. We have 180 great members that range from block clubs to larger community development organizations like building communities, and lots of people in between. And so we're in the process of developing our 2021 policy agenda, which contains our priorities. We care about a lot of things, but we have to make some decisions about how we spend our time, energy, and resources. So next week we'll have 2 roundtables, and that's for our members. However, there is a survey that is open to members and partners. When I say partners, if you are part of a coalition that CDAD is part of, we'll send you that. But if you just feel like, looky here, Ruth, I want to fill out a survey because I don't have enough surveys in my life, email me. Some people like that. It's a way for us to at least know where you are. But we would ask you to, and there's a question, are you a member? Are you a partner? Indicate what that is. And then we're also going to be doing some one-on-one phone interviews. So we've got some phone calls we'd like to schedule with our elected officials like Representative Raquel, but also some of our folks, we've already talked to Rashida Tlaib. We also want to talk to partners. So again, I see a lot of people here that I have worked with or would love to work with, and that I think would be a better opportunity to have some discussion about how Detroit Action is doing their work and how we can build power by dovetailing not just our policy priorities, but our strategies and tactics and our collaborative work. So I will put my email in the chat and reach out to me, and I'll be real nice to you because I care about people who care about the things I care about.
Thank you, Ruth. So we've had a great conversation today. We've heard from Peter Hammer from Wayne State University's law that tells us that it suggested to us that we need to transcend from our deficit thinking mentality and to understand that we fund those things that we care about. And so we, as advocates and people doing this work, have to ensure that we continue to lift up our voice and our community's voice so that it's heard and understood, and budget, and our city budget, state budget, and federal dollars as well are allocated in a way that represents the needs and the desires of communities. Tawana told us that human development and social capital yields the largest return. If we don't invest in our residents, we lose our residents, we lose our wisdom, we lose the social fabrics that we've woven. So it is important that we continue to make sure that human development and our communities stay at the forefront of what it is that we are invested in and the work that we're doing. We certainly want to thank Councilwoman Lopez and Councilwoman Pro Tem Sheffield for their efforts around the Bill of Rights. They have done an awesome job in hearing from the community and hearing from the various fractions that make up community to put into our charter to ensure that our rights and the needs of the people are being met. Everything from non-discrimination, the right to water, the right to housing, the right to safety, the right to live in an environmentally healthy community, the right to just the basic needs of life, and something I met Ruth as, is the right to access to mobility, to be able to get around, right? And so, that's a huge piece that has been missing. We also heard that there was a water policy that has been laying dormant for 2 administrations, and that could have been implemented to help divert this, but it wasn't. And so we would think that, Flint would have been an eye opener for us in the city to start doing things around water, water shutoffs and all of that. But it took a pandemic to get people's water turned on. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, we're not alone in this challenge. I have sisters and brothers out in the Southwest who live on reservations who just got running water and electricity for the first time as a result of this pandemic. And so, now that they see how important water is, our elected officials, it is important that we continue to uplift that voice that says this is, when this pandemic is over, we can't go back to what people keep saying is normal, because normal was not good for everyone. Normal was injustices. Normal was not enough jobs. Normal was inadequacies and deficiency in healthcare. Normal was, people living in inadequate housing. So we don't want normal. We want to go to a a new normal where it's inclusive and people have access. The Bill of Rights is implemented and people are actually, we're holding our city and state and county officials holding their foot to the fire to make sure that that happens. Comments. We have about probably 5 minutes, I think, left if we have that long. I see
Only about
Jill's in the room. Jill, how much time we have?
about 3-4 minutes.
Okay.
I know I just wanted to say thank you, Phyllis. You're amazing at your summary. I was not here for all those pieces. Just wanted to, my bad, I couldn't jump on earlier, but just wanted to say thank you for that little bit. And again, I popped my contact info into the chat. I can post it one more time, but we would love to have your support and partnership as we move forward with the Detroiters Bill of Rights and building really a strong citywide coalition. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, and I get to finish now, which is amazing. So I'm gonna go eat dinner. Also want to say thank you, Miss Rogers Sheba. I met years ago when I was first elected, so nice to just connect and see familiar faces in the room, and just want to say thank you all for the work that you do. There's definitely lots of changes that need to happen, but just want to appreciate you all who have been doing the work for decades. So
thank you. Brandon, any closing words?
No, thank y'all for having me. Thank y'all for being involved in the fight. I mean, I'll just, articulate that, like, both from a local and local perspective, the wave of parachuters and the wave of people who parachute into our city, in our state, for national elections and for statewide elections even, aren't going to be here next year. And so it's up to us really to think about, like, how is it that we want to build our city, and how do we want to build our and shape our politics for our neighborhoods. When we think about, what is created, and what is created during these even year elections, my good friend and ally Art Reyes talks about it like sandcastles. Like, these are just sandcastles that are being built, but then when the election comes, they are just washed away and nothing is left and remains. And so for us, and for Detroit Action, and for a lot of the folks that, like, we're committed to, and we're trying to build with folks like, many people who are on this call as allies, is like, how do we create something that's durable? How to create something that is built by people and reflective of our values. And we can do that both in our policy, as in how we allocate money, but also in terms of, like, the people that we put up for office. How do we get more Raquels, more Councilwoman Pro Temp Sheffield, and more folks who are representative and reflective of our cities and our neighborhoods, but also reflective of our values, and we put up policy. So that's all.
Thank you, Brandon. Barry, anything from Councilwoman Pro Temp and you?
Yeah. So first, thank you for having us. I think that these types of conversations are necessary when we're looking at the future of our city and the policies that we want to shape our future. Our office is going to always be committed to listening to the voices of the people, with the understanding that policy cannot be created in a vacuum. It has to be done collectively and with everyone at the table. And so with that being said, just thank you for lending your voices to the process. Continue to do that even in the virtual world. We want to hear from you. And if there's anything that our office can do, by all means, let us know. And thank you for doing the work that you all do.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone. As a person who likes to keep people engaged, I would go around everyone and just do a round robin. Do you have anything to say? Ms. Caldwell, you have any comments?
No, actually I don't.
Okay. Cedric, you haven't said anything. Are you there? You have any comments?
Yeah, I'm here. I just want to thank everybody who spoke so far. I think I definitely shared a lot of wisdom, a lot of perspective on the fight, the continuous fight. My one piece, or I guess my one comment that I always look towards when it comes to proposing policy and looking at how we can change these structures and systems, is that piece of transparency. I think someone had mentioned earlier, and how we can continuously keep the community informed on where that process is. And one, holding those officials accountable, but two, being able to actually see how is this moving that needle when it comes to increasing equity and access in all these different areas. So me, myself, being in the healthcare field, I'm a medical student. I'm just really curious to see how we're able to, when it comes to increasing water access, seeing how we can translate that into improvements in healthcare, or improvements in health outcomes for our community. whether that's COVID related or whether that's in relation to people's hypertension. And I think the spectrum of disparities that our community see are so wide. And we look at the intersectionality of all these different social pieces. I think it's very vital to kind of look at how all of this plays into health overall. So again, I want to thank everybody for the work that y'all are doing. It's necessary, and it's just really encouraging to see.
Thank you.
Phyllis, I see the time is almost up, but Stephen has had his hand up.
Okay, I didn't, I'm not that technologically
Just real
savvy.
quick.
Go ahead, Stephen.
It's just real quick. What I was trying to say is that when we see people come to the table to talk about issues, please keep in mind the amount of stress and the effort that they've made in actually making their presence there. A lot of people in this city don't have access to a vehicle. They have to arrange a ride, or they're going to take the bus, and they may have to ride a bicycle to get to the bus. I've been a bus rider for a long time, and it takes something to get out there and do that. And it also takes something for people to get out and actually speak too. It's removing their self-consciousness, their shyness, the things that are going wrong in their life. They're worried that those are going to come through in how they speak. And what we need them to say is listen, we know everybody's going through some struggles. And some of our people that are going through the most struggles right now are our children. And I really think that we need to focus an awful lot on how our children are being brought up in this city. We have to fight tooth and nail for the children to actually have access to everything they need. I can't see enough libraries in my community. I need to see more libraries. I need to see much more access for the kids. Thank you,
Stephen. And with that, I think we are done. How about that? Everybody have a good one. If I don't see you, have a happy holiday, and watch out for the other guy because it could be me.
Hi, everybody. I see everyone starting to flow back in. I think a few groups are just finishing up their conversation, so we're going to give them about 2 minutes, and then we'll be ready to move on to discussing all of the things that we talked about in our sessions.
What up? I see Savannah Brewer in the audience. What up, Savannah Brewer? What up, though? Seeing some good people. Hey, Miss Pat Dockery. Hey. Kenyatta Campbell is in the building. Hey, y'all. Shout out to Kenyatta Campbell, Cody Rouge in the house.
What up, though?
What up, though? I saw you all on Facebook today with your consultation. You go, girl.
Shouting out like we at a real party, for real, for real.
Hey, that's how we do. You know what I'm saying? We want people to have a good time. I
hey,
see.
Hey, Kenyatta.
Huh?
Y'all saying, hey, Kenyatta.
Hey, right. Hey, Auntie.
How are you?
All right.
Killmonger from Black Panther. We see the new executive director of MAC Development, Antoine Jackson, in the building. What's up, man? Hey there. Oh, man. Good to see y'all. Come on in. Come on back in.
Hey, Orlando, I've been jumping around to the different breakout discussions. Some really, really dynamic conversation.
Yeah, I would say so. I was in one room and it was really powerful.
Yep.
Can't wait to hear about it. So hopefully everybody has their designated reporter outers.
Yeah, I think my sense of it is that the facilitators believe that they're doing the reports out. I could be
Okay,
wrong,
great.
but yeah.
That's fine. Yep. Camille, we'll wait for you to give us the cue to go ahead and get started once everyone is sort of back.
Okay, I'm looking out and it looks like everyone is back here. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, I think everybody is back in the main room.
All right, Alondra, take it away.
Okay, so we wanted to have a conversation where everyone could just highlight what they heard, comments that were made, or what was talked about within your breakout session. Are we going in a specific order, Orlando, or are we just gonna have
So everybody had session numbers. We had session 1, session 2, session 3. So session 1 through 6, and so we can call them out. But what we want to do is first thank everybody, especially the amazing group of organizations that put on these breakout sessions. We know that it took a lot of prep work to do it. So shout out to 482 Forward, Youth Organizing Collective, Bridging Communities, Inc., the Villages CDC, Office of Council President Pro Tem Mary Sheffield, and Council Member Lopez, Detroit Action, U of M, D4, Deep Dive, Detroit, Building Community Value, Detroit Justice Center, Detroit Will Breathe, Detroit Future City, ALPAC, the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability, Congress of Communities, ECN and CDAT. All of you did the work to make those discussions as dynamic as they were. We want to thank you. So this is what we're going to do. After we hear a report out from each group, we're going to spend some time talking through exactly what we heard. And then in real time, Camille, because she is the Zoom goddess, is going to create a snap poll to help us organize some of the big themes that are coming out of what we are talking about. And I'll ask you all, so make sure that you have your unmute button handy, or the chat function ready to go around some of the big themes that you heard in the report outs. So each group has 3 minutes to report out. Don't try me. Don't try me. You got 3 minutes. And we'll get into the larger group discussion. So let's start with group session number 1. What was session number 1?
Mental health during virtual learning.
Let's do it.
Great. So we started off with talking about what 482 Forward is. For those who don't know, 482 Forward is a citywide education organizing network that is based in Detroit. We just talked about what 482 Forward does, how we organize, what platform we use while organizing, which is invest in my health and safety. Invest in my health and safety is referring to investing in our youth and investing in our youth's health and safety in school, in their community, in their neighborhoods. We went over what components of the platform was, such as the things that we do. So like one thing was cops over counselors. We created that to make sure that we're putting, counselors over cops, sorry.
I was about to say, I was like, what?
But we're gonna make sure that we put our counselors, our mental health of our students over funding police in our schools, so that we can make sure that our students are getting the best environment and learning that they can. So based off referring to the best environment that they can during school, we based our discussion mostly on how we would reimagine our schools, how we would reimagine mental health in our schools, what we can do to make sure that our students are getting the best education that they can get. And I'll leave it to Amna to talk more about that.
Oh yeah, so definitely. So basically what we talked about was just what investing in schools and investing in the students with the students as a best interest looks like to the students, to the teachers, and to the parents. So what we did was create a Jamboard. And see if you could pull that up.
I can't because someone else is sharing, but I can drop the link and anyone can look at it.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So Lindsay will drop the link to the Jamboard that we created, just asking ourselves what a fully funded school that is focused on the students and in the best interest of the students and teachers looks like to us. fixing problems, whereas students don't have enough supplies compared to when a teacher needs to, you know, take money out of their own pay to buy student supplies. So it's just, we talked about a lot of common issues like that in schools, and I think it was really collaborative, really productive. Yeah, that's basically what we went over.
Thank you. Thank you for that report out. Thank
Yeah, of
you.
course. Thank you.
We're gonna go to session number 2, policy and politics in the neighborhoods. Who's reporting out from there? Is that Phyllis Edwards?
Of course it is. No,
You
know what? And I neglected to do that little to get that done for someone to report out. But we had a great session, I do believe. We had Councilwoman Lopez join us, and we had Barry from President Pro Temp Councilwoman Pro Temp office, Sheffield office to join us as well as Brandon Snyder from the Detroit Action. And we started out talking about how policies influence communities. One such policy, as I mentioned, was the Social Security. People don't think about that a lot anymore until you reach Social Security age. But when that was invented, that of course it was built on injustice, as it didn't allow for agricultural or domestic workers to receive those benefits. So initially from the onset, that was a policy built with inequalities in it. And it wasn't until 1948 and 1950s, respectively, that domestic workers and agricultural workers were able to start receiving those benefits. So as we look at the policies that have come out now as a result of COVID-19, especially those that prior to COVID-19, according to our own mayor, water, for instance, was not a public health issue, and our own mayor said that people stopping the water shutoffs would promote people to not pay their bills. And so now that it is a national health crisis and they've made allowances for people to have water, how does this impact us moving forward? And so with that, Councilwoman Lopez and Barry shared with us the Detroiters Bill of Rights that's being implemented into the charter. And that bill is people's rights to be free from discriminations, right to water, right to safety, right to health, right to environmental health, right to recreation, right to access and have access and mobility, and the right to the basic needs and quality of life. And so getting involved in that effort, and what it took all the advocacy groups that came together, because we're more powerful together than we are separate. And so this is a real true demonstration of that, as all those advocate groups came together to help structure and build this Detroit Bill of Rights that will hopefully be the key to some of the issues that people are afraid of coming out of COVID-19 as the moratoriums and the restrictions become lifted. We certainly have people and families and children and vulnerable seniors who are involved and really concerned about their quality of life. But hopefully this bill will be implemented. It's of course, bills take a while, not until August of next year, but working towards that is certainly one of the efforts. And we shared a lot of information around how you can get involved with board and commissions. And Councilwoman Lopez also shared the PowerPoint and all of the other data that goes along with the Bill of Rights. And so it was a very fruitful conversation, very touching and productive.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. We appreciate it. A lot of great points there. Session number 3, development in the neighborhoods. Who is?
That's me. I'll try to summarize our rich conversation.
Okay,
So, so we had a great panel. We had Lauren Hood, Chase Cantrell, and Sam Butler. And we just started out talking about what is equitable development. And we said it's a combination of an inclusive process as well as outcomes. And Lauren went a bit further and said that she only thinks equitable development is reparations, where the people who've been harmed in the past are the ones who benefit in the future, or in the current, or in the development that's happening. We talked a little bit about the inequities in having market forces determine the value of development, because sometimes it costs more in construction and in labor than the building or the development is worth. And so unless there is some government subsidy or government building the houses like it exists in other countries and other places, it's really hard to actually get some of the things that communities might want, because the capital has to come from somewhere. And it's really a deficit of capital, which makes some projects much more difficult to do. We also talked about this idea of an equity scorecard, somewhat based on what is happening in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And their 5 categories are equitable community engagement, equitable land use, equitable economic development, equitable housing, and equitable transportation. And we had a lot of debate back and forth about if having a scorecard and having a score is really what's important, or having people have the power and have their voices to be heard so that the things they want actually is built into some of these developments. We talked about a lot of other things, but I think I'll stop there, except for one of the things we thought might be useful if we have a scorecard or principles for Detroit equitable development, having a different AMI than the regional AMI, making sure it's 50% or less, so Detroiters with the revenues and the income they have can actually afford it. Having a way to retain current residents so they aren't displaced. And this idea of maybe also having money go in some sort of a fund that will be of use to local residents, and maybe also for things like home repair, so that people aren't forced out of their communities. So I think I'll stop there, but this conversation is not ending. We welcome anyone who's interested in these conversations to continue engaging, because it's gonna be an issue that is gonna continue to be there for years to come.
Thank you, Trina. Love it. Next up is justice and police behavior in the neighborhoods. I'm sure this one was a popular one. Who's reporting out?
I can.
Hey,
yeah, hey, how's it going, Orlando? Our segment was part of a presentation with the Detroit Justice Center and the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability, and ALPAC, Detroit Will Breathe. We had a one could call sobering and difficult yet open discussion that was grounded in us watching a video that was presented by the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability of the police shooting and death of Hakeem Littleton in the neighborhood. And from there, asked the question, what does it mean to create policing and safety for communities, and what are our thoughts about that? And it brought up questions that range from the ways in which Black and brown bodies are criminalized, including young Black and brown bodies, like children, and how children aren't seen as children. We talked about the ways in which the question of policing is tied to not only systemic racism, but in particular, the policing of Black bodies where they can and can't go. And so in a ways, maintaining the racism and segregation that exists in society, and just talked about like what it means to, put resources into communities that actually keep folks safe, and what it means to listen to those communities when they say what resources they need in order to do that. So certainly it was a conversation that needs to continue, and really more about people kind of sharing and expressing their concerns, knowing that the issue of safety is a real thing, but thinking of how to reimagine that without the punitive practices and policies of the police department and the carceral state. So that was it.
Wow, sounds robust. Thank you for sharing, Tristan. We appreciate it.
For sure.
Equity and property in the neighborhood, session 5. Who's reporting out? Is that Kim or Nicole?
Hi, I'll be reporting out for our group, and I don't know how I follow Mr. Taylor's report out. Was great, and I can't wait to see the recording for it. So my name is Nicole Brown, and I am with Detroit Future City. And I, along with my colleagues, Pierre Davis, Kimberly Faison, and Ashley Williams Clark, led the discussion on equity and property in the neighborhoods. And so we were fortunate to be able to have a conversation that was even a bit of a broader discussion, and really also talk about land use and acquisition and transparency in that process. And so the conversation centered around really centered around 3 different programs, and really looking at how Detroit Future City, as a innovative think and do tank and stewards of the Detroit strategic framework, are able to utilize the programs that we're working with to work with community partners to be able to help them forward their work within these areas. And so our colleagues talked about really talked about how do you navigate the land ownership and purchase process to be able to equitably utilize open space with the Eastbury Warren pilot program that was led by my colleague Pierre Davis, which really lifted up the importance of working with and building capacity of neighborhood organizations to be able to navigate lots of city systems, to be able to actually access that land and be able to make it into an active space within the community that is led and shepherded by community members. And then we focused on what does it really mean to have a housing market that is strong, and looking at how can we work with community development organizations to be able to creatively implement an adaptive an acquisition and rehab program that, when it is complete, working with a robust set of community partners from local CDOs, the CDFIs, and the city of Detroit, to be able to ensure that at the end of the pilot program, there are 70 new homeowners of affordable housing in Detroit neighborhoods. And then we rounded out our conversation, led by Ashley Williams Clark, around what does it really mean to have an economically equitable city of Detroit. And so really looking at the definition that was created and led by community members, which I do want to share with all of you all. And so our definition for that is a city where all Detroiters are meeting their unique needs, prospering and fully and fairly participating in all aspects of community within a thriving city and region. And so we were able to have a really robust conversation with our community stakeholders on the call, and really pulling apart what are some of the barriers, but what are some of the opportunities that they're seeing to move this kind of work forward. And one of the big things that came out of was, one, the importance of being able to navigate relationships within the community and all the stakeholders that you need to be able to move this work forward, but also really looking at how are we building up the capacity of our community organizations and our Black clubs, who are really on the front lines of fighting this fight, and being able to make sure that they have the resources to be able to take control of land and homes in their community, and really be able to transform those spaces into places for all Detroiters to be able to live and thrive equitably. Did I get in my 3 minutes?
You did, and you did just fine following Tristan Taylor. He's a hard act to follow, so good job. I want to punt to, thank you, Nicole. I want to punt to Maria Salinas from Congress of Communities to talk about the conversation that happened in session 6, Revolutionary Love Between the Generations.
So yeah, it was a robust, great conversation. I want to thank Orlando, Alondra, Donna Givens, and myself, that we kind of led a conversation in regards to intergenerational work and how do we get better in this era right now to create something, that will, a mechanism or whatever we want to call it, that will be practical and effective for the now. Understanding that there's been a lot of things that were done in the 60s and 70s, but how do we really let young people and elders come together, naturally and effectively, and build a mechanism, that will be for the now, for what's happening now. Communication was huge, alignment for this movement, narrative, how do we make sure that, our young people, and we're talking, we're talking 14 to 25, and then millennials and all the in-betweens, 40, 50, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds. How do we how do we utilize each other to build power? And our main thing is, you know, as the young people, the younger people that are in the movement with Black Lives Matter and everything that's happening on our streets, and they're out there 200 days, you know, how do we create a visibility, you know, that there is an understanding that they have people that have their backs, that are working on ordinances and policies and laws that complement what they're doing. I think a lot of times they feel alone out there. And we want to make sure that, you know, they know that they're not alone. And like I said, you know, it's the young people, and we got to respect them and create space. You know, we learned about using verbiage like, you know, enlighten versus educate, you know, awareness versus educate. You know, when we talked about let's educate our people, it makes it seem like they're not educated. And our Detroiters are the most smartest people in the world, as far as I'm concerned. We talked about really just trying to figure out how do we do something different so that young people create the space for their voice and their value to be in the front lines of what we're creating, but also respecting and understanding that there's older people that have, you know, resources and relationships. So something came out also like, we help fund this movement. You know, if we have those relationships, you know, how do we, without taking it over? We don't want it, you know, I mean, we want to be part of it. We want to, even if we're not there, we want to be there in some sense and create an aura or presence without imposing. And we need to build that. Currently, you know, CDAD will be taking on Building the Engine as our backbone, and they are creating a youth council that's going to start hopefully structuring and creating this mechanism. But I think it's like never before. It's just, you know, let's not do something that's been done. Let's do something that needs to happen now, so that we got the backs, that everybody that are 50, 60, 40, 70 have the backs of our young people in this movement, and that we can be more effective and more powerful that way. So I want to thank everybody for that, you know, the conversation.
Thank you, Maria. I'm going to punt to Yusuf.
What up, though, good people? Man, there was a lot of good stuff that was said. Immediately that jumps out to me, thinking about equity and what does that center, how do we center that? And for me, I think for all of us, is like, we're thinking about our mothers, our grandparents, you know, people, as Maria just mentioned, like who we don't necessarily consider as educated or in the in crowd, right? But they, because of their equity in the neighborhoods, right? It means something. It counts for something. And so because of our privilege, because of our access to help create better policies, you know, influence what development looks like. And when we do these things, it excludes police. Police doesn't need to be in there. They don't need to be in our community. But when we don't have equity, that's when we have police. When we don't have development, that's when we have police. You know, when we don't have the things that we need, that's when the police come and other things. And so through this conversation, being able to centralize and connecting ourselves and understand that every voice in our neighborhood is valuable. But the central thing is our neighborhoods. And so to talk about our neighborhoods, also to challenge ourselves, and particularly in our Black communities and how it influence people throughout the region, we have to move from how we see our neighborhoods. You know, we can't continue to see them as hoods. We can't continue to see them as hoods and taking pride in hood, because that is a oppressed community. We have to call it what it is. And we say as a neighborhood, that means we're going back to invest in the people there. Despite what's going on, we're going to build, we're going to be the anchors. And if you moved out, that doesn't make you a bad person. If you don't want to live no more there, that doesn't make you a bad person. What makes you a bad person? If you don't want to connect and help somebody, that's what makes you a bad person. Because that you moved out and where you don't see the reality, like this is where we come from. And I think each and every one of us, if we go back and look at our history of our family, there was some house that our families all migrated to, that they all lived in until we was able to move on to other. And this is what the neighborhoods is. You know, we got to get back to that old school of doing, and this is what we're trying to facilitate and foster. And I think these what these conversations are. They're not an end all. They're just a continuation of things that you all have been doing in our different sectors. And we're connecting the dots. So this will make this powerful, but it becomes more powerful by continuing to act and continue to do and continue to pull things together.
Man, and that's why we got Yusuf Shakura as one of the hosts, man. Way to drop the mic. So what we want to do is give you all an opportunity to sort of, right, Asandi, what we want to do is give you an opportunity in the chat function to sort of just say, you know, a sentence or two about what your biggest takeaway was. What we want to do is create a poll from what we've heard in the 6 report outs, and what you are putting in the chat based on the session that you were in and based on the report outs that you heard. 1 or 2 words in the chat on what you know, what's glaring for you, what's your big takeaway, what's priority for you. And we'll try to capture some of that. Camille is creating a snap poll in real time. And we would try to prioritize, you know, some of the issues that were touched upon today and put them on the agenda for a close looking at for next year. So go ahead in the chat box. Okay, it's coming in. So Camille, I'm going to name some of this stuff out, and then you can sort of figure out, do your goddess thing with the Zoom snap poll. Equity provides safety, not police. Priority for me is to figure out ways to support building community and connection that addresses people's needs. Supporting Detroit Public School students now. Reparations is greater than development. We need to locate our battles at the policy level. Yesterday's conversation centered on a new way of doing community. Yusuf just mentioned going back to what works. I believe there is a happy medium. Change our language, change our thoughts, change our actions, create change. Communicating and listening. Reimagining what expertise is. I like that. Okay, I gotta figure out, it's moving so quickly. Reimagining what expertise is and who are the experts in community development. Tristan says public housing, stop relying on the market to provide affordable housing. Reimagine what we mean by safety and police. Be vocal advocates and pathways for each other to be fully heard. Love it. I'm gonna get a few more in here. Helping people work together. The Detroit Bill of Rights focuses on basic needs, equity and policy, education and training, and the creation of inclusive policies designed to ensure equity is at the center for all aspects of community building, education, housing, and land use. Emphasizing student and youth voices. Yes, advocating for their voice to be heard and showing that youth voice matters. And I'll even take it a step further, making sure that their voice and ideas are implemented and resourcing their voice. Creating spaces that truly welcome and foster community engagement. Love it. And squash the digital divide across the city of Detroit. All right, so with what we've heard, and you guys can keep them coming. I think I did a good job of trying to get to everybody that posted something in the chat. We want to sort of, you know, take this snap poll. I don't know where we are with it. Camille, how you doing with the poll?
I'm doing good. I'm working my magic, distilling all of these great thoughts as well as the feedback that we had earlier into some nice points. And so what I'm going to ask everybody to do is rank your top 3 issues or takeaways that you have from today. So right now, I think I have 8. I'm going to look through the chat and see if I should try to like create one more. Yeah, one more second.
All right, so give them that prompt one more time, Camille.
So the prompt is going to ask you to select your top 3 kind of takeaways or like the top 3 issues that you're prioritizing based on everything you heard today, everything you learned today, the feedback that you heard from your groups that reported out, the conversation that we had earlier in the day as we were preparing for the breakout rooms, and of course the feedback that we received from all of our hosts.
All right.
One more second, because I think there's one more that we need.
This is real-time tech. I love it. I'm loving this, y'all. Y'all are, man, this is great. Okay. And so what's going to happen is a poll is going to appear in your Zoom function, and we're going to ask you to take the poll, and it's going to be appearing in just a couple of minutes. And then we have a few more. Here we go. A few more in the comments. Black and brown bodies and communities need to be invested in, not punitive institutions like prisons and police. Alignment between generations. That's from Maria Salinas. The previous comment was by Tristan Taylor. Loretta says, how we still have so many people who cares about building up our neighborhoods and helping the young people what they would like to see happen, helping the young people see what they would like to see happen. I love it. I love it. This is great feedback, guys. I would say we're ready for the poll. So let's do it.
I'm about to launch. Oh no, what happened? Oh. 1 second. Technology is not my friend.
It's okay. Your mom, Donna Givens, is saying we need to work harder to engage and listen to everyone in our communities, to hear them and understand their perspectives. I couldn't agree more, Donna Givens Davidson. I couldn't agree more. And I don't know if y'all know